Hello anime fan, welcome back to What If Animes 2.0. So in this video you're gonna see, what if Naruto was chosen by a goddess for massive harem? This is part 2. And if you want more, then hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe. So let's get in the video and do check out the author of the story. Coming down the stairs, Naruto stared at the sight before him in dumbfounded disbelief. I can imagine where you two hung out last night. His voice felt like a sonic boom, resounding against the quiet of the room and sending her head pounding again. It was a cruel twist of fate that sake was her form of alternate energy, but she was never able to stop herself from having hangovers. Can you keep it down? This headache is killing me, came Erd's muffled reply. Erd was laid out on the sofa, her left arm dangling over the edge and her face turned into the seat cushions. He went to bed last night and didn't see her. He had a momentary thought of concern before he remembered the meeting between her and Anko. What time is it anyway? I don't think I'm going into work today, someone said from the adjoining couch. Anko? Naruto asked in disbelief. Shush. Not so loud, Erd whispered, wishing the pillows were thick enough to drown out that annoying chirping coming from outside. He silently watched Anko somehow curl up into a tighter ball, managing to squeeze herself into the sofa chair, or what Erd had called a love seat. It looked uncomfortable as hell, but he doubted she even noticed. Looking at the two of them in apparent agony, he was learning a valuable lesson. Never, ever, ever, let Erd and Anko take him out to drink. There was enough proof in front of his face to make him swear off alcohol for life. What time did you come in last night? Anko blinked the morning sun out her eyes and tried to locate Naruto by the sound of his voice. What's this? It's been just a couple of days and he's already giving you a curfew? Not moving an inch, Erd answered. I don't remember. What time did we come in? Must have been late. Hope we didn't hurt anybody. I don't wanna know. I don't wanna know. Naruto repeated the mantra as walked into the kitchen. Opening the refrigerator, he looked and after several seconds reached for the easiest thing he could put together. A jug of milk to go with the box of cereal. Quick, easy, and light on the stomach. He remembered her telling him eating a meal before the test would be the smart thing to do, but looking at her laid out in the chair, he wanted to make sure. Anko-san, you sure I should eat something? He said we shouldn't eat anything. Trust me, it won't make a bit of difference one way or the other. Erd turned her head around, facing Anko's general direction. Isn't that sabotage? You sure he won't get mad at you for spoiling his test? Anko, indifferent to the question, shrugged. No, who's going to tell him? Good answer. The two women lapsed back into silence. Taking a seat at the table, Naruto, wolfing down the bowl of cereal, decided that ignoring the women would be the best choice. If he started talking to them too much, he wouldn't be on time. The old man across the hall from him was always drunk. He would ramble on about the good old days for hours and hours. He didn't have that time today. With Erd being a goddess though, she probably had some interesting stories in record time. Putting the bowl in the sink, he made his way into the living room, securing his item pouch, and making sure he had a decent number of kunai on hand. Even with her eyes closed, Anko caught his movement. A word of advice. Don't try to be a hero, okay? There is no way you could beat him, and even if you were well trained, it would take a hell of a lot to take down Kakashi. She took a deep breath to stop the pounding. Always look for an alternative way to accomplish your goal. If I were you, I'd use my teammates. He stopped for a second to take in her words of advice. She was a far more accomplished ninja, so doubting her would have been stupid. But that crack about using his teammates. He tried visualizing the three of them teaming up for anything, but the image wouldn't surface. With a nod and wave, he left the house, closing the shoji screen door behind him. You think he's going to pass? Erd asked, a little worried. Anko shook her head. He shouldn't. I can't tell with Kakashi. I don't remember anybody passing his exams. Maybe I need to give him a little help. Nah. He can do it. Otherwise it wouldn't mean anything. Erd reluctantly agreed. Besides, she doubted she could use any spell and not blow up something with her head seesawing back and forth like it was. Can we go cheer for him? The act of moving brought a groan of frustration from Anko. Just how much did we drink? No, but if we get rid of these hangovers by the time he's finished, we can throw him a party. Good idea. Oh, and Anko? The other girl muttered something, a sign she was listening. You haven't told him about yourself, have you? Thought not. He would have hated to see the outcome had he not for once in his life paid attention to someone telling him something. Kakashi sensei was a damn good ninja. Almost the entire fight his face stayed buried in that book of his. He hated to admit it, but the only time he seemed to get serious was when he fought Sasuke. He hated the guy, despised his high-handed attitude and the way he thought anyone and everyone should acknowledge him. But Naruto wasn't going to lie to himself. The best and only move he had was the Kage Bushin, and Kakashi-sensei batted him aside like he was nothing. It was only desperation that made him team up with Sasuke in the end despite Anko's earlier warning. Leaning back against the wooden post he was tied to, Naruto idly wondered why he was taking this defeat so lightly. Going back to academy wasn't his idea of fun, but Anko seemed like she was honest about training him. If she held up her end of the bargain, then one more year wouldn't be that bad. Who am I kidding? He muttered, hanging his head dejectedly. I don't want to go back to school, he shouted to the sky. What the hell are you shouting about, Dobi? Sasuke sneered. Naruto looked at Sasuke like he'd grown two heads. We're going back to the academy. What else could it be? Somehow, someway Sasuke's face managed to frown up even more. I'm not going back anywhere. If you two weren't so weak we wouldn't be here. Naruto glanced over and watched as Sakura's face collapsed. If he wanted to know how big of an asshole Sasuke could be, Naruto had all the evidence he needed. Glaring at Sasuke, he put as much contempt in me voice as he could. It didn't look like you did much better. I doubt you lasted any longer than us. If he hadn't been looking he wouldn't have noticed the slight flinch. Bingo. He glared back at Naruto. Lot of good you did. What did you think charging him like an idiot would do? No wonder you're dead last. Naruto almost snarled, trying in vain to get out of the tight rope. Wait until I get out of this. I'll kick your ass. HMPH. You never kid and never will. Watching the two of them go at it, Sakura's reflex action to back up Sasuke suddenly fled her when she saw how serious they were about decimating each other. This was becoming a recurrent problem, not the fighting. She doubted the two of them would ever get along, but her second-guessing herself when it came to Naruto. He didn't seem that different. He was still loud on occasion, and he had the ability to talk without thinking over what he was about to say, so what was it? Though she didn't want to admit it, it had almost everything to do with the gossip surrounding him. It was petty and shallow, but that's what it was, and despite her best attempts at seeming disinterested, she was just as curious as everyone else, probably even more so. He hadn't stared at her or tried to manipulate her attention all morning. It felt weird and she missed it after having to deal with his attention for years. Gruel. Sakura blinked at the sudden noise and looked at Naruto. Sorry. I worked up an appetite, he said, giving a sheepish grin. Sasuke looked as if he was caught in an epic internal debate of colossal proportions. For what seemed like minutes he silently ignored both his teammates' inquisitive looks, something he was apparently good at, and frowned. Naruto readied himself for another verbal spar and watched in a stupor as Sasuke pulled out a kunai to cut through the rope. His mental processes were having too hard of a time assimilating the vision and were desperately trying to stop his brain from stopping completely. Naruto had a spare thought to wonder if Sasuke had finally snapped under the pressure of being such a stick-up-the-butt asshole. Sakura, once again torn between indecision, once again timidly tried to get Sasuke's attention. Sasuke-kun. What are you doing? He didn't turn around to give his answer, continuing to slice through the rope. I'm helping this baka get the ropes. But what about Kakashi-sensei? He's not here and I can't sense him anywhere in the area, so we're okay. Through the whole ordeal Naruto thought he was in some sort of bizarre world. Sasuke helping him, Sakura second-guessing Sasuke. What was going on? His feet touched down on the soft earth and he warily watched as Sasuke went back to his seat. Naruto watched the Uchiha to see if there was some catch, something he failed to pick up on. Then he chided himself for being ridiculous. Sakura tentatively looked between the two boys and reached her bento out, offering it to Naruto with a shy smile. You should eat it. You must be hungry from the sound of things. His response was something he never would have said if he hadn't ever met Erd. It's not poisoned, is it? The clearing fell into complete silence. Even Sasuke couldn't help the incredulous look that showed on his face. Sakura for her part handled the question admirably. She didn't display any signs of the anger that she felt. Other than the hideously huge vein sticking out on the top of her left eyebrow, she seemed perfectly fine. Dobi. Sasuke said, shaking his head in disbelief. As if his words were a signal. Sakura stood Naruto took one look at her face and knew if he allowed her the chance to get her hands on him he was going to be in an awful lot of pain. She was barely 2 steps away from his reaching him when a loud boom and a puff of smoke surrounded them. There was a moment of spine-snapping fear, and he knew who he was going to see when the smoke cleared. Sakura, who was facing him, could see the look in his eyes and knew they were in trouble. "Please God, don't let me fail. I'll be the perfect little girl." When the smoke cleared there stood Hitaki Kakashi. His one visible eye was serious, colder than anything the 3 graduates could remember seeing. He took a step toward them and despite the warning bells telling them something was horribly wrong they stood their ground. All passed the exam. This was the second time that unnatural silence surrounded them and Naruto found out he didn't like it. Their sensei was standing there looking smug and satisfied. Sakura looked like she was close to having a heart attack. And Sasuke, he stood in the same trance-like state, looking just as surprised. But, I thought you said." Sakura started, still struggling with the situation. There was a slow smile spreading across her face as she came to grips that they finally made it. He waved his hand, waving off the sentence before Sakura finished. "I got to admit, I didn't think you 3 were going to make it, but you pulled through. You all are the first group to ever pass my exam." Naruto blinked in disbelief, but listened as Kakashi-sensei began talking. He was imparting what made a ninja worthy of respect and the need of having good teamwork. In the back of his mind as he listened Naruto found a modicum of respect for the man before him. He talked a little longer and then excused himself, taking off to do whatever Junins did in their free time. With the meeting over Naruto found himself oddly excited to get home. The word seemed like a foreign concept on some levels. Home just a couple of days ago was a rundown apartment complex he'd been given when the Hokage couldn't find anywhere else to house him. The room he'd been given could barely be considered such. There had been holes in the roof that leaked when it rained. Sometimes he couldn't get hot water and had to bathe in the freezing spray of the showerhead. Just a few instances of what he went through, but they were a vivid reminder of what he lived in every day for years. Now, he had his own house, in his own name according to Erd, and a real friend. She had some strange hobbies, but she honestly wanted to help him, she just did it in some strange ways. Like yesterday when he found out she'd been interviewing girls to be his girlfriend he hadn't known what to think. His initial response was to get angry, but when he thought about it, it was a little flattering. He started to walk away, turning around to give a small wave to Sakura and a nod to Sasuke. "I'm going home. See you 2 tomorrow." Neither one had an opportunity to speak a word back because Naruto was already in the distance, racing home. When Naruto walked into his home he didn't even get out a quick hello before he noticed 2 things. There was blue smoke and Erd was trying desperately to air out the whole house. His mental ability to cope with the absurd was stronger than it had been before Erd dropped into his life, but he was still at a loss. "What's going on?" Stopping in mid-step Erd looked startled to see him. With the way she'd been running around he had doubted she heard him. Spinning around, she looked surprised to see him. "Naruto, what are you doing back so early?" Cocking an eyebrow, he looked around, waving a hand to point out the smoke in the house. "What's happened?" She stumbled over a proper explanation. There's been a problem." They were only 4 words, but the ramifications could be innumerable, and just like that he wondered why he was in such a rush to come home. "What happened?" Scratching the back of her head, Erd tried not to look directly at Naruto. He didn't look upset, but she figured that was more from him not understanding what was going on. "Well, you see, Erd, where is the Naruto-kun?" Coming around the corner was a woman. He kept it simple and plain because there were no words to describe how beautiful she was. Swaying into the room she wore a tight white blouse unbuttoned enough that he could see a tantalizing bit of cleavage. She wore red leather pants that looked to be painted on, they were so tight, and if that wasn't eye-catching enough the neon green hair that fairly shimmered, cascading down her back, somehow made the picture stunningly exotic. He didn't know who she was but he doubted there were even a handful of women in the world that could pull the outfit off. The sight of her was so jarring he totally forgot about finding out the problem. Which left 3 people staring at each other in variable forms of astonishment or surprise. "Who are you?" Naruto managed to squeak out, his voice unnaturally subdued. Erd and Morrigan exchanged a quick glance. The short catch of their eyes silently communicating a conversation only known to the 2 of them alone. After Naruto left earlier in the morning, and the 2 of them worked off their hangovers, they talked about this particular moment. Didn't think the succubus should keep it a secret. Her line of thinking was if Morrigan was going to teach Naruto how and when to harness his power, then he should know everything that was going on. Morrigan hadn't had any particular reason to keep her true appearance a secret, but she didn't make it a point of flaunting it. Being located in a military ninja village didn't give her a lot of options to use it in the first place. So why bother? That was until one of Erd's wacky potions exploded when she dropped it by accident. The blue smoke was a direct result of that. Whatever was in the glass tubing, Erd had rattled off a long list of chemical names she couldn't begin to understand, was strong enough to make her drop her glimmer spell. She couldn't maintain the human visage of Mitarashi Anko, henceforth why she appeared as she was now. Unfortunately, before they could clear the house of the smoke, Naruto came home. "I am Morrigan Ainsland, queen of the succubus and one of the various overlords of Niflheim." Naruto closed his eyes and tried to will himself away from this point in time. "I don't care. You want to know what happened to me on the way here?" Erd nodded and Morrigan remained still, somehow sensing Naruto was about to go on a rant. "I had two Chunins I've never seen before try to ambush me to challenge me for a date with Erd. 3 girls from my old class made me stop and tried their best to charm me for information. Ino somehow managed to corner me and tried to blackmail me into a date. Somehow word has spread that I've become a playboy. And if that wasn't enough, Kiba and 5 other people tried to trail me to my own home." The 2 other worldly women simply stood in mute disbelief. "Think I'm joking? Look out the window. You can see a little white dog peeking out from the bushes." Erd did just that, and couldn't stifle the giggle that rose up. Since the house was in one of Konoha's more secluded areas, it had a good amount of forest area surrounding it. It had been one of her main points of attraction. Away from the main village proper, not too many people would venture into the outskirts of the city, not when the Kyuubi's container lived in the area. Naruto drew the attention to himself again, talking to Morrigan with a tired sigh. "Since you're Erd's friend, you can do whatever. I'm going to go take a nap before I go to see Anko-san." They watched him walk by and head to his room, neither one knowing what to make of Naruto's strange behavior. "Is he always like that?" Morrigan asked. Erd shook her head. "I've never seen him like that." Thinking over his behavior, her eyes nearly bulged out of their sockets. "Did he just say you were one of my friends?" Morrigan rested a finely manicured hand against her hip and smiled. "He sure did. Looks like I won't have to tell him anything." "That doesn't count," Erd said indignantly. "Unfortunately it does." Looking in the direction Naruto went to, she added, "I think you're warping the poor boy, and you've barely been here a week." Erd responded hotly. "I haven't did anything." "Right." Rolling her eyes at the neon green-haired vixen's sarcastic-ness, Erd said, "Don't you need to go back to work or something?" Morrigan frowned at the unwelcome thought. "Take the fun out of my day. How can I get the glamour back up anyway?" Erd thought about the question for a moment. "The smoke is sticking to your skin. A simple shower should wash everything off." "Are those kids still outside?" Taking a small glance out the window, Erd nodded in answer. "Can't leave yet then. I'll use your shower and get this stuff off." Turning to Morrigan's retreating figure, Erd tried to rally some help. "You aren't going to help me clean this place up?" Morrigan never stopped her stride. "Nope. Got a hot date with a blonde-haired kid to get ready for. Hey. He's only 12 years old." Erd shouted when Morrigan was out of view. Naruto arrived at the designated training area and found Anko sitting atop a tree stump, happily chomping away at a stick of dango. He'd left the house earlier than expected, only offering a quick goodbye to Erd. He knew it wasn't the most well-mannered thing to do, but oh well. Talking to her for any extended period of time often led to disastrous results. That blue smoke being one of them. He had one of the most bizarre dreams he could ever remember. There were demons of all sizes, shapes and colors. Resplendent in armor of the darkest purples, reds, and blacks. Some were beautiful in a way that left him breathless, and others were so hideously malformed they seemed to be some amalgam of nightmares put together. They were all amassed on a hill, the sky a blood red that seemed too unnatural to be real. There was talking, jumbled words from a language he didn't understand. The whole thing had seemed so surreal, layered by a freaky feeling first-person point of view. He didn't remember how long he stood immersed in the dream, but it must have been a while because Erd had to wake him up. During the walk to meet Anko, he tried recalling more of what happened, but most of it eluded him. Maybe he should ask Erd what that blue smoke was. He didn't want to suddenly grow horns or start slobbering on himself. Yo! Anko shouted as he came into view. He returned the greeting, though it was a bit more subdued. You okay? He looked up, his face a little uncertain. Yeah, I just had this weird dream when I went to sleep earlier. What about? He released a sigh. You wouldn't believe me even if I told you. Try me. Naruto shook his head. I'd rather not. Anko stared at him for a moment, seemingly looking right through him. It was a weird feeling, like she already knew what he was thinking. Instead of staring back, he simply tried diverting her attention to another subject. So what are we doing today? You gonna teach me how to blow up stuff? Anko smiled, giving him a look at the same time he took to mean she knew what he was doing. I'm not going to teach you to blow up anything. You need to learn some control first. Naruto frowned. Control? What's that got to do with anything? She sauntered her way up to him until they stood only a couple of inches apart. Tapping him on the forehead she said, everything. You can't have power and use it responsibly without the right amount of control. Naruto didn't understand, and his face must have seemed like an open book. Take the Hokage. He's the strongest ninja in the village, correct? At Naruto's nod she continued. It's widely known that he's the most powerful, but along with that notoriety comes a sense of responsibility. What if he just decided one day to say fuck it and he didn't want to do it anymore? What's to stop him from simply making a bunch of rules to make his life easier and do whatever the hell he pleased? She didn't go into startling detail about the hierarchy of Konoha. Anko knew Naruto didn't know about the check and balance system that was in place. Yes, the Hokage was ruler supreme, but in order not to give him too much leeway, a council was set in place to vote down certain measures if push came to shove. His lack of knowledge would help her make a point though. Naruto's eyes were wide as saucers. He'd never thought about it like that. The easy, more ideal answer he always used when regarding his one-time ultimate dream somehow seemed wrong, and he had to really think about it. What did stop the Hokage from simply doing whatever he pleased? He was the best, the most powerful ninja in the whole country, and no one would willingly go up against him if he decided things needed to change. Glancing up, he could see Anko looking down at him with a smirk on her face. See what I mean? The greater the power, the greater the responsibility and need for control. Being a shinobi can be fun, but knowing how to throw around red-hot flames and freezing ice isn't something you teach to anybody. And considering who you are, I think control is something you need. Naruto looked up at her, his face a blank mask, but Anko could feel the tension coming off of him. Waving a hand at his defensiveness, Anko shrugged. I know and don't care. You don't think I just hopped up one day and decided to do it. I've been watching you for a while. That's stalker behavior. Anko and Naruto looked up into an overhanging branch, finding Erd swinging her legs, looking as carefree and easygoing as she was on the ground. What are you doing here? Anko deadpanned, not surprised for some reason to see the goddess. I got bored and wanted to watch. Great speech by the way, Erd winked. Anko asked, how did you get here? Walked. Where's the slobbering, rabid groupies? Erd's eyes took on a luminescent light, making the hair on Naruto's neck stand on end. There weren't that many at all. I think mostly everyone has gotten over the shock of it. But one idiot tried to get grabby, so I showed him. Naruto didn't like the sound of that at all. What did you do? She shook her head, a little perturbed that he thought she bungled up something. I shook his hand and sent a couple of volts into him to let him know that I wasn't going to be messed with. Anko shook her head in wonder. Why am I not surprised? Directing a glare at the woman below, I wouldn't go too far if I were you. Some of us are keeping secrets. You wouldn't dare. Erd's eyes were shining with mischief. Try me. Lost in the mounting argument taking place, Naruto tried to get the lesson back to him. He had no idea what they were talking about, but from the frightening battle auras they were emitting, it wasn't anything pleasant. Anko-san, weren't you going to teach me something? She blinked, turning to look at him as if it was her first time seeing him. What the hell is wrong with these women? A simple question for which he knew he wouldn't receive a simple answer. What was I talking about again? Anko wondered aloud. Control, Anko-san. You were talking about control, Erd readily answered, cheeky grin in place. Anko muttered under her breath something foul enough to make even a sailor's son blush. Okay. We'll start off with tree climbing. If you can master that, then we'll go on from there. Tree climbing? Naruto tried not to sound so unenthusiastic, but he failed miserably. Erd agreed with Naruto's view. I don't blame you. It sounds horribly boring. I can fix a potion that could help your body balance out everything in a blink of an eye. Nothing scared him more, and Naruto practically begged Anko to tell him everything he needed to know. After a detailed explanation, where he never uttered a single word, Naruto grabbed a kunai and streaked into the forest for a suitable tree. Erd's brow was creased into a frown. All he had to say is no thank you. You can't blame him. Your track record speaks for itself. Her hands glowing in purplish light, Erd stood on the branch, her hair fluttering in a sudden breeze. You want to try me? Anko smirked, letting a hint of her razor-sharp canines show. You sure you want to try this now? I would love to, but unfortunately I don't want to get started and have to stop. It would only take a few minutes before Anbu or some other shinobi catch wind of what's going on and come to investigate. A static charge that had rent the air began to dissipate as Erd powered down. She did have a point. In the Earth realm such antics would go unnoticed, and she could throw magic around without a second thought. Scold pisses her off. Zap. Toshiyuku being a pervert. Zap. Mara getting on her nerves. Zap. It took only a short mental debate to help her make a decision. What rank are you? Anko figured Erd was talking about her shinobi ranking. Special Junin. Erd looked thoughtful for a moment. Sounds important. Shrugging her shoulders, Anko didn't agree. Not really. Just means we're assigned special jobs and have more work to do than regular Junins. In a way it's a pain sometimes. So you pretty much run your own show? Not liking the line of questioning, Anko narrowed her eyes and asked, kinda. Why? Erd looked like the cat that got the canary, the grin on her a frightening combination of someone's precious little girl and Orochimaru's. Oh. No reason. Anko was caught completely flat-footed when a ball of purplish lightning hit her right in the face. The explosion that sounded in the forest drew the attention of Naruto, but displaying a mental strength worthy of an Olympian, he simply ignored the indignant female shouts, booming explosions, plus foul language, and concentrated on tree climbing. If he tried hard enough, maybe he could sink himself into mental exhaustion and find out he dreamt this whole thing up because his reality couldn't be this messed up. Sakura was having a pleasant chat with Hinata. The two of them didn't talk to each other much. During their years in the academy, Sakura couldn't really pinpoint any important conversation between the two of them, but it was a nice change of pace to talk to another female every now and then. With the gauntlet thrown down between Ino, all their conversations seemed to devolve into shouting matches, which made Hinata a perfect conversationalist. It would help immensely if she didn't blush and stutter every time the subject of Naruto came up. Why haven't you told him you liked him yet? Sakura asked, driving to the root of Hinata's problem. Face lighting up like a nuclear cherry, Hinata stuttered out, I can't. You've seen that woman he's staying with. Ah yes, Sakura thought. The woman. Personally, Sakura thought there were tons of things wrong with the picture. The least not being why Naruto just treated her like she'd dropped off the face of the planet. Who would have thought that she would grow addicted to his loud, sometimes embarrassing displays of affection? Now another girl moves in and she was left with short hellos and grunts of acknowledgement. What was that saying her mother always told her? You don't know what you got till it's gone. I don't think it's like that, Hinata. Maybe she's just a friend. Hinata leveled her with a look that said she doubted Sakura was as smart as she thought she was. Sakura-san, she's living with him. Naruto doesn't have any family members. Sakura knew that, but that didn't explain everything. Jumping to conclusions didn't help anybody. She had fallen into that gap as well earlier, grasping onto every shred of information she could find about the mysterious woman, but common sense prevailed. The rumors circulating around her teammate helped with the decision an immense amount. Naruto a playboy. Get real. It was then that the smell of smoke hit her nose. She could hear Hinata gasp, and looking around, Sakura could see what used to be Naruto walking with an obvious limp. She said used to be because he looked as if he'd been charbroiled from head to toe. His bright orange clothes were dark gray, not an inch of color to them, and they were hanging off him in tatters. He looked like he just came walking out of a war zone. Sakura stood up and was about to run to him in concern, but stopped when she saw the pissed-off expression on his face. Hinata had no such reservations, walking toward him worriedly. Naruto-kun, what happened? He didn't look up or stop his tension-induced walk, but he growled out an answer. Nothing, Hinata, everything's peachy. Neither girl believed him. Naruto. You can't still be mad. We said we're sorry. Hinata and Sakura looked behind Naruto and watched the approaching women in silent surprise and mounting horror. Sakura looked flabbergasted. These two had to be the women Ino was telling her about earlier in the day. They fit the description perfectly, which also happened to blow all her earlier statements regarding Naruto's life away. Hinata was close to tears. Her dreams and future hopes taking a steep nosedive in front of her face. She didn't want to believe the rumors. Her Naruto wasn't like that, but the truth was in front of her. It wasn't my fault anyway. I thought you people weren't allowed to do underhanded crap like sneak attacks. Anko snarled at the goddess. Urd shrugged her shoulders, looking positively smug. I don't know where you got that idea from. With my situation you should have expected it. Anko smirked. You paid for it anyway. He stopped and spun around, pointing an angry finger at the two women behind him. What the hell is wrong with you two? You blew me up. I don't have eyebrows anymore and you still want to fight. They both had the sense to look ashamed. Even shooting death glares at one another. Glaring at them both, Naruto tried breathing through his nose because the normal way just wasn't working. If he'd been this angry before, he couldn't remember. Not only had he been electrocuted, but he'd been cut, pounded, and almost bludgeoned in one afternoon, all in a 2-hour span. Not only that, but there was a good piece of Konoha forest that would need rerouting. Urd made mention that she could do it later, but he didn't trust her to do it without turning the entire forest into wooden zombies or something else crazy. How the fight got so out of hand in the first place was a question they couldn't answer. He was minding his own business, running up trees and trying to ignore them both, when his tree became uprooted and he could feel several thousand volts shoot through his system. If not for the Kyuubi, he wouldn't even be standing up. He glanced around and could see a small crowd gathering. Not doubt they wanted to take a look at Urd, but for once he was too annoyed to bother thinking about it. Look, I'm sore and tired. Let's just go home and then I can shout all I want to. Urd leapt across the short distance and hugged him, smashing his face into her considerable bosom. Oh, I'm sorry. I really am. Anko is so mean sometimes. You started the whole thing, hey. Naruto shouted, drawing their attention again before things got out of hand again. I'm going home. Are you two coming or not? Don't you think you've caused enough damage for one day? Yes. I got to rewind the tape and watch my soaps. Got nothing else to do, so okay. The three came to a simple agreement, then walked off and turned a corner, headed to one of the more secluded districts. The entire time Sakura and Hinata watched them in a dazed amazement. I guess the two women thing wasn't a lie, huh? Sakura thought out loud. She wouldn't have believed it until she'd seen it with her own eyes, but there was proof positive right there. But they seemed mighty violent for such beautiful women. Poor Naruto-kun. What have they done to you? Hinata cried out, dismayed. They have their claws in you, don't they? Don't worry, Hinata. We'll talk to him. Nobody deserves to be with a violent lover, or lovers, not even Naruto. The visual stimulation was too much for Hinata's brain to handle and she fainted, still standing on her feet. Sakura shook her head. I see Hinata won't be any help, so I need to do this alone. That just meant more trouble for Naruto on the horizon. Omake. Naruto-sama is angry. The two women were bound, arms and legs chained to the headboard of his massive bed. They were clothed in black leather, each one in a different design, leaving their naughty bits uncovered to his roving eyes. Do you know how humiliated I was today? It was a rhetorical question, but they answered nonetheless. We didn't mean to. It was an accident, Naruto-sama. Naruto scoffed at the notion. Accident my ass. I think you two were trying to get rid of me. Morrigan didn't share the goddess's views. She didn't appreciate being treated like some concubine. When she was involved, it was always the other way around. I am an overlord, and you will release me this instant. Her scream was accompanied by a dramatic clap of thunder outside. Nodding his head, Naruto figured the woman would be hard to handle, being royalty and all. Uncuffing Urd, he let her stand. Urd, it looks like she's going to need the works. Urd's eyes sparkled like diamonds. Do you mean it? Really? Smiling, Naruto slapped the platinum-haired goddess on the ass and said, yeah? And make sure you bring me a case of those Red Bull energy drinks. This looks like an all-nighter. Morrigan sat, legs crossed in an elegant display of womanhood, barely taking notice of the action transpiring across the television screen. Always dressed in the most scintillating attire, she wore a midnight black bodysuit, a daring red stripe streaming down the collarbone to the wrist, And to finish the breathtaking display, she let the zipper rest halfway down her front, a sliver of cleavage darting out from the sides. Her pale, alabaster-toned skin emitted a soft glow, catching the morning light at just the right angle no matter which way she turned. The neon green hair, something that would give many people pause, shimmered and swayed in the sun's warming rays. And her eyes, they seemed bottomless, like they held the answers to any male desires and question. She was the picture of perfection, a level of beauty only attained by, "Would you stop that please?" It gets annoying. Morrigan cocked a perfectly groomed eyebrow, innocently fluttering her eyes as if she had no idea what Erd was referring to. "You know what I'm talking about. It's too early to start with the glamour girl act." Morrigan shook her head, somewhat mollified that the goddess could put a name to something so inconsequential. "There are two things inherently wrong with your statement. Number one, you're one to talk with half the stuff you strut around in. And second, you have too much time on your hands if you're naming a particular look." Erd looked down at her clothing, then looked at Morrigan's, then back to hers. "I don't see it." Releasing a sigh, Morrigan said, "Erd, an imitation Earth World schoolgirl outfit is not normal attire." Erd begged to differ. A white blouse buttoned to the top, plaid-colored skirt, thigh-high black shocks and pair of loafers on her feet. To finish off the entire ensemble was a tan-colored sport coat. "I think it's chic. Can't blame me if this world is so historic. You do make a valid point." Erd thought over the circumstances of their conversation and came to one conclusive point. "We're just too fashion-conscious for this place. You should see some of the looks I get around the market. I think it's more the female population's ire from their gaping significant others than anything else." Erd tapped her index finger against her chin. "Maybe. Serves him right for all the hell they put Ruto through." Slightly tilting her head to the side, Morrigan's eyes narrowed into slits. "Ruto is it? When did he get a nickname?" "When you were manhandling him for that exam he had to take. Someone had to heal him. It was for his own well-being." Erd held up a hand, signaling Morrigan to slow down. "I'm not arguing. Without your help I'm sure the results would have been far less favorable, but that still doesn't alleviate the fact that even the Kyuubi was having trouble healing him." Morrigan said nothing in reply, silently dropping the subject with a slight nod. By chance, Erd's bringing up the Chunin exam brought Morrigan back to her earlier thoughts, namely the confrontation with Orochimaru. She had replayed the entire ordeal in her head since their altercation in the Forest of Death, and there was this vibe, this feeling that the man knew far more than he let on. And though she had not released enough power to bring notice to her true self, the unbridled aura of strength Orochimaru unconsciously radiated foretold of something far more sinister beneath his skin. From information gathered from Anko's memories, and the comprehensive folder on him in the bingo book, the man was a monster given skin. His crimes were far-ranging, guaranteeing his entry into Hild's arms when his death finally caught up to him. But depending on circumstances, that would be some time coming. If Orochimaru was able to soul rape victims, and jump bodies as implied, then he was essentially immortal. Pulling herself from her internal monologue, Morrigan directed a question to the goddess, who was now floating above the small table, her eyes glued to the television. "Did you get any information on Orochimaru?" Erd never took her off the screen in front of her, replying in a bored, conversational tone. "I did go and look into that. Funny thing is, the entire file under his name is locked down tight. No one in my little circle of friends can crack it." By the way," Erd started, "why haven't you gone to check up on it yourself? The less time I spend at home the better. As soon as I set foot on the main walkway you can be sure my caretakers will try everything in their power to keep me there. Besides, I have one of my vassals looking into it." Erd had no idea how she had such a warped perception of royalty. "I would think being raised with silver spoon wouldn't bother you so much. If you had have grew up in your rightful place, then such inquiries wouldn't be necessary." Erd's shoulders tensed, letting Morrigan know that her comment was a bit below the belt. It was one of the subjects she came to find Erd didn't take too kindly to discussing, and Morrigan didn't begrudge her the privacy of her own demons. But, the courtesy was a two-way street. Morrigan's own problems stemmed from a multitude of situations that at this precise moment she held no sway over, and until she was able to bring the problems under control, then here she would be. Her presence in her home would do nothing but inflame the already fragile situation to further levels of unrest. Erd bringing it up, no matter how lightly, was something she would not allow to go without reprimand. "Someone is mighty catty this morning," came Erd's sarcastic response. "I must admit, the times are providing a little strain. The village is in an uproar, and unless this woman is as accomplished as they make her out to be, then this village will not last long." When Erd failed to provide commentary, Morrigan continued. "And the appearance of this Akatsuki has drawn my interest. This world has always been in turmoil. War is continually wrought upon the lands generation after generation, but something concerning this turn of events has drawn my eye. I don't want to sound callous, but my concern is solely focused on Naruto. I've never been the saving the world type. It's the reason why I'm still second-class goddess," Erd said with a slight shrug. That answers a lot of questions." At that, Erd did turn around, frowning at the silent implications. "And what is that supposed to mean?" Morrigan picked up her almost forgotten tea, which was nearly cool now. Bringing it to her lips, she took a dainty sip, her upbringing ringing out from the small display. "Simply that with the chaos you bring on a daily basis, your ranking was never in question. You're one to talk. Miss, I've been turned down, so I send death threats. No wonder you can't get a date." Morrigan kept her composure, but it was hard. Playing the life of Mitarashi Anko was, in a word, difficult. Not because of her traumatic childhood, or betrayal, or any of the other numerous reasons the female's life was utter crap. It was because of Anko's personality. When her soul still inhabited her body, Anko had been forbidden fruit in many male eyes. She was beautiful, catching the eye of almost any male she wanted, but because of past trauma the girl was a little more than some, make that any, males could handle. Morrigan chalked it up to the warped relationship Anko maintained with her mentor Orochimaru. It would be simple to say he twisted her. Orphaned, she had nothing she could fall back on. His, Orochimaru's, treatment of her was what she built the foundation of her personality on. No matter how perverse or demented the task, she set out to accomplish whatever he wanted her to do. The young girl was barely over the age of 16 before the snake Sanin began using her for his own pleasure. Being a succubus, replaying the images from Anko's memory neither repulsed nor sickened her. In all honesty, she'd done that and much more to some of her victims. It was who she was, sugarcoating it wouldn't hide her nature. So the male population stayed away, leaving Anko to resort to ulterior means in order to release her daily frustration. That was the situation Morrigan by chance happened unto, and despite her constant attempts to reverse the damage done, it did little good. Males were still scared shitless around her. Now, instead of fighting against the moving tide, Morrigan decided to play the hand she was dealt, thus the complete 180 personality shift sometimes. It was extremely cathartic in its own little way. "You know, I think he's going to be pissed about the changes." Morrigan looked around the room, cataloging the small but definitive differences. "I think it looks more distinctive. Somehow, I don't think Ruto is going to agree." "Wait. You were all for it before now. What made you change your mind?" This was the second time Erd had to turn away from the Mazinger Z special she was watching. "Morrigan, we turned his room into an indoor bathhouse. You don't think he's going to be a little pissed?" "No," Morrigan shook her head. "I think he's going to be furious." "And that doesn't bother you at all?" "No, should it? He's been angry with me for far lesser things." Knowing Naruto's matchstick personality, Erd believed her. "We can act like it's a gift. The both of us could teach him a new move, something dealing with magic, and tell him it's an added present. I highly doubt he would welcome it with open arms," Morrigan deadpanned. "If it doesn't do wanton destruction, or teaches him how to dole out more pain, he won't be too receptive." "Typical male," Erd chuckled. Since Naruto left with the second master of all perverts, the fiend Hapose trumping him by miles, life around the Naruto home held far less of the frantic energy the blonde brought from his presence alone. Erd, without any targets, kept her potions and antidotes up on the shelf in her room. Morrigan, without the blonde punching bag, spent most of her days reclining, making idle conversation with the only other celestial in the vicinity. Neither preferred extending themselves to any degree with any kind of labor. Continuing to play the role of Anko's life was more of a hobby for Morrigan. Taking missions provided means for her to escape the confines of the village walls, gave her the opportunity to truly work her craft away from the prying eyes. Naruto's ability to escalate small situations into brush fires alleviated a good amount of her wanderlust. Sometimes Morrigan wondered if his dual nature, The human and demon aspects of him created a blend of creature her essence salivated to feed off of. But with him gone, their attention was forced to other subjects to occupy the time. Tap, tap, tap. Could you get the door, Morrigan? Seeing how refused to move from her spot in front of the television, rolled her eyes. You might want to sit down normally. No telling who it is this early. Complied while slowly floating down into the sofa chair. Don't matter. Only the jealous village girls, desperate males, and perverts show up. You pretty much have the whole village pegged. Actually, paused, looking at the nearest clock. I think that's Sakura-chan. You want to guess why I invited her? Asked, smiling in secret delight. No need, Morgan said, randomly waving her hand through the air. I already know the girl's possessed. And by something quite powerful, I believe. After a handful of months, life with was just as exciting and migraine-inducing as the first. That may have sounded like a grand announcement, but it was anything but that. The potions, the fights, the arguments, every day there was some new mini-crisis he had to overcome, and it was slowly changing him. He didn't want to sound absurd about it, but it was true in his eyes. He preferred kunai, ambushes, and death over potions, magic spells, and burnt toast. A hard choice indeed, but he would make it in a second, and he did. That was why he was following the perverted Sanin through another town, looking for some old lady friend of his. Well, the training managed to secure him was an added plus. Never forget the training. Giving a mental sigh, Naruto trudged after his new sensei and wondered when he was going to get a break. He wasn't one to normally bitch and complain, but things had slowly changed from surprisingly uncommon occurrences to the daily bizarre event. His home was becoming a nest egg of trouble. Bless her heart, tried to do good on so many things. There was the time she spiked Sasuke's juice one morning to try and lighten his mood. Disaster had struck when Sasuke made a complete 180 in personality. He readily answered Sakura's request for a date, driving the poor girl into a rambling mess of sated nerves. Had that been all, then the situation would not have been so bad, but Sasuke hadn't stopped there. Ino, Aoi, Kyoko Miki, the list went on forever. Naruto remembered one particular event in vivid clarity. Flashback. Sasuke stood leaning against a tree post. His demeanor was too laid back, too different. It was making the small group wary. Sasuke never hung around anybody. Naruto knew why he was so different, but he was hoping was doing something to fix the problem. Things were getting out of hand. If she didn't hurry, they would be royally screwed. Shino, your mom is hot. Nobody moved, unsure of who had the gall to utter the phrase. They need not have bothered. Sasuke appeared totally relaxed, as if he complimented women older than him all the time. What? Shino asked in stunned disbelief. When we get married, could you call me Daddy? The entire park went silent, and Naruto, Kiba, and Shikamaru made a grab for Shino before he could put Sasuke in the ICU for life. Stay away from my mother. Shino roared, infuriated. End flashback. The whole episode had left Naruto weary and tired, giving him one more reason to dislike the Uchiha, even if it wasn't his fault. Though, the aftermath had been worth it. Sasuke had a village full of frothing women and angry boyfriends after him, and he had no clue to why they wanted to pull him limb from limb since he couldn't remember a single moment of the entire incident. And Sakura, her view of the brooding bastard took a steep nosedive that afternoon. It was the happiest day of Naruto's life. He didn't get to enjoy it for long. Similar episodes were becoming the norm. There was the Nympho House Fairy incident, when didn't feel like cleaning the house and tried summoning fairies to clean the place. Surprise, surprise, she got it wrong. The entire day they hunted down perverted fairies that seemed hell-bent on disappearing and feeling up every woman in Konoha. Then there was the time he was teleported to some part of hell itself, coming face to face with some loon named Laharl. He looked about the same age, and Naruto could admit he was powerful, scary powerful, but he seemed just as crazy as the two females that hung around him all the time. Naruto had been more than glad to leave the place. Managing to leave without promising the eternally cheery goddess, Flan, he would return. Added to the chaos was his scarily unrepentant, mentally scarring sensei Anko. If there was a woman on the face of the planet that drove Naruto to the heights of fear, she did at the drop of a hat. Naruto would have doubted they were human. Sometimes he had to question himself if the woman was human herself. In the beginning things were okay. Training with Anko had been fun. She was good at it, and with Kakashi-sensei barely teaching him anything important, Naruto ate up her attention like a starving man presented a feast. She never taught him anything awe-inspiring. A fire jutsu here, water jutsu there. It was a slow process getting her to open up her bag of tricks as he pleaded for more information. Be careful what you wish for. When the Chunin exam came around, Anko, his lovable, always smiling sensei, became a monster. His chakra control was better, but it still wasn't as good as it could be. That was a problem. Anko-sensei's remedy? Tossing him in a river to teach him how to stand on the waves, while shooting various forms of fire jutsu at him. He mouthed off at her once for the harsh treatment. His punishment was to be tossed off the side of a mountain and making him run up the side. His hand-to-hand skills were abysmal. She decided to fix that problem by teaching him several obscure forms of taijutsu she knew. The regular way was not good enough, not enough first-hand experience, she said. His body became her drawing board to show him what to do. Ninjas needed to be aware of all things around them. Even at peace, their ability to see beneath the underneath should never leave them. Anko taught that lesson by ambushing him whenever and wherever she felt like it. His only moments of reprieve were Kakashi-sensei's meetings, and when she had to go actually work for once. For weeks he acted like a cornered animal, making his teammates fear for his mental well-being. They hadn't believed him when he told them what was going on. It took him being attacked on his way to Ichiraku for them to understand. After that they quit walking with him, period. Some teammates they made brutal, sadistic, frightening. All of those could be used to describe the nightmare he went through. Did he learn anything? Yes. But that wasn't the point. He had such a crazed look in his eyes one time that some villagers actually pitied him. It was to the point that Naruto woke up and expected his day to go downhill as soon as he stepped foot out of his room. Taking a mentally compelled deep breath, Naruto stopped his internal rant. Highlighting only the bad wasn't right. If he was truthful to himself, and he regularly was, he would readily admit he could not have imagined what his life would have been like if neither woman was in it. They were a bedrock for him, and though his group of friends expanded to include even someone like Neji, he would not forget the first ones. After the fight with Zabuza and Haku, he returned home glum, contemplating if being a ninja was the dream job he thought it was. Anko pulled him aside and told him in no uncertain terms what it meant to be a shinobi, what it meant when you became someone capable of using power and making choices with that power. After the unexpected surprise of finding out Gaara carried a curse just like him, talked to him. Told him what the Biju were and how they, Gaara and others like himself, were making the world a better place by keeping them sealed away, unable to lay waste to the world. Anko preparing him for the exam, picking up his training to even tougher levels when he told her Kakashi-sensei was training Sasuke solely. Letting him meet her two sisters, taking a license suspension for trying to smuggle them in without permission just for his sake. A dozen other little moments sprinkled out among months, all of them meaning just as much as the next. It was why he put up with so much. In his mind, the good far outweighed the bad. At least it was better than this little side trip he was making with the kings of all perverts. Hard to believe someone could beat out Kakashi in that regard, but there was someone like that actually breathing. Oi, you paying attention? He cut his musings and frowned at the white-haired man. Yeah, can't you teach me anything the last few miles before we hit the village? Jiraiya sighed into his hand, muttering under his breath. Giving the blonde an annoyed glower he said, I just told you. If you quit daydreaming then you could remember. I wouldn't be daydreaming if you weren't always talking about perverted crap. What do you know? You're too young anyway for someone like Chan. Jiraiya shook his head in mock despair. Don't know what she sees in a shrimp like you. Naruto glowered. Look here Senin, the deal was one date with You teach me a couple techniques. Don't back out the deal, or she'll put you back in the hospital. Naruto looked at the man, trying to gauge if he was really one of the legendary three. She really got you good with that lightning bolt, huh? You shouldn't have been peeking in our house. We've had trouble with perverts like you before. Shut up, brat. Naruto had to admit, his first meeting with the Toad Sannin left a lot to be desired. The older man had caught him and walking toward home and immediately intercepted the two of them. Naruto had unwillingly been subjected to 3 minutes of the worst pickup lines in the history of man. If not for Anko calling the old geezer out, Naruto would have thought he was just another loser out for a date. Had he been a Junin, Naruto would not have blinked twice, simply turned home and went about his business. But a Sannin, that was a different story entirely. It had taken a lot of cajoling to get to even speak to the gigantic pervert, but she did it with the understanding that Jiraiya helped train him. It was similar to Kakashi in way. Jiraiya disappeared and reappeared at his own ease, driving Naruto crazy, but did not budge. After the Hokage's death, Jiraiya thought it was a perfect time to finish up his part of the deal, taking him along to find the Sannin Tsunade. And while he learned an incredible move, the entire ordeal with Orochimaru and Kabuto had been nothing but a pain in the ass. That wasn't mentioning the attitude Tsunade had given him when they first met. Is it really so bad, Naruto? Tsunade asked, more than a little curious. Despite her best wishes, she found herself growing more and more interested in the blonde. During their short time together, he displayed a dramatic array of personality traits that interested the doctor in her. He would jump from being playful, to angry, to serious in the blink of an eye, throwing off her most fervent attempts to pin his personality down and label him. And had that been all, maybe she would have been able to silently pick him apart from a distance without feeling any slight flickers of affection. But it wasn't. There was something about him that pulled her from the angry malaise of her thoughts, forcing her to view the world through his eyes. No matter how she put him down or ridiculed him in the beginning, he never once allowed her opinions to stop him from accomplishing his goal. Learning the Rasengan, protecting her from Kabuto, coming back to life when she was sure he was dead to the world. He hurdled obstacles that would fell people twice his age. All of this, and she hadn't even started on the overheard conversations about his life back in the village of Konoha. Not really. It's a little better. People quit hitting on her when she fried this one guy for being too grabby. Tsunade shook her head. How did you come to stay with this woman anyway? I'm sure there have been problems with such an arrangement. Naruto snorted, thinking about how he wondered the same thing at one time. Not really. There are a lot of rumors always going around about one thing or another, but people hate me too much to be bothered anyway, so no one says anything. Was having problems at one point with people trying to get her to move out. Now that she's been staying with me for a while, some people are thinking I corrupted her or something. At that, the conversation suddenly dissolved into silence. Even Shizun's eternally optimistic view took a turn downward. Naruto's words were a stark reminder of who he was and the life he had led up till now, making Tsunade give him another cursory glance. He looked okay, as if he'd simply been talking about the weather. But anyone with a trained eye could see the strain in his shoulders, the way his steps suddenly picked up speed, or how he used his hair to shield the dull look in his eyes. It was a side of him she hadn't seen yet. You didn't answer my first question, Tsunade said when it seemed he was not going to continue talking. What question is that? Naruto asked, trying to feign ignorance. He really did not want to get into that conversation. Mainly because he forgot the lie gave Jiraiya to explain their particular situation anyway. Tsunade did not let him slide, eyeing the back of his head hard enough for him to feel the sensation. We still have a few more hours till we arrive. I can wait till you get your answer together. Well, damn, this is bad. Shuffled through the aisles of clothing, trying and failing to find something that caught her eye. She had been at it for nearly 2 hours, and nothing she could see appealed to her particular tastes. The problem in her eyes was that this place lacked the fashion sense that existed on Earth. Even heaven had a better selection. Being stuck in a pseudo-futuristic feudal era, everything was done in a sad imitation to look daring, and although she'd seen some exceptions, they were just that. Take for example the woman behind her. From the vest and headband she wore, took it to mean she was a career woman. That wasn't anything to scoff at. Believed in women being capable of doing anything their male halves could do. The problem came in when you looked at her attire. The only word could think of was bland. She didn't stand out at all. What was the use of being a ninja if nobody in your own village recognized you or noticed how cool you were? Dear God. I'm starting to sound like Naruto now, moaned the disheartened goddess. Then I take it you must be Erd blinked, and turned around, finding a raven-haired woman standing before her with the most interesting natural eye color she had seen in a long time. Yeah, that's me. Smiling, the woman extended a hand in greeting. It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Yuahi Kurenai. Had no clue who this woman was, but knew to display some form of common courtesy. It's nice to meet you too. Shopping? Kurenai gave a light smile, nodding her head in answer. Yeah, I got a nice little bonus today. Thought I would spend a little on myself for once. Just now noticing the Konoha symbol adorned across her forehead, blinked at the woman's attire. Now that is how you make a statement. Though I would lay off on some of the robes. Turning back to the rack of clothing, asked, so what do you do? I'm a teacher. I teach a 3-person genin team. Looked up, like that bum Kakashi? Quote ellipsis quote. Kurenai didn't know how to reply to that. He's damn near as bad as that perverted Jiraiya, huffed, remembering past episodes where she had to lay the law down concerning the two. Kurenai stood rooted to her feet. In her entire lifetime she never once heard anyone talk about one of Konoha's most prized shinobi so flippantly. She could see no Konoha protector adorning the woman, so that meant she wasn't a ninja. But even villagers gave proper respect to the caste set about. You sound very formal with both of them. Still surveying the clothing, picked up this weird-looking blouse she figured an 8-armed woman would be better off wearing. I should be. Kakashi is Naruto's on-again teacher. And I had to promise Jiraiya a date before he would consider teaching Naruto. That was after I caught him trying to sneak into our home and take pictures. Seems like some of those rumors actually held a kernel of truth. Said rumors regarded the house Uzumaki Naruto lived in, one of the more secluded areas of the village. People, both villagers and shinobi, called it several different names. Some labeled it a madhouse, home to the Kyuubi and all his vicious, blood-loving underlings. Then there were the ones who called it a love shack, because of the varying amount of older women that seemed to frequent the home. Kurenai believed none of it, or at least she didn't initially. As a genjutsu specialist she made it a priority to always focus on the facts. True, word was Naruto's home got demolished, put on fire, and always had some sort of excitement going on, but that was simply normal, at least she thought so. Looking at the clock on the wall, narrowed her eyes, putting down the 130th piece of clothing she had looked at this afternoon. Damn it, I didn't know it was this late. The kid is going to kill me. Blinking at the outburst, Kurenai, spurned forward by the traitorous habit of always trying to display goodwill, asked, is something wrong? You could say that. We decided that his place needed a change for the spring. You changed his home around? Did he like it? Kurenai asked. You see, began, taking a deep breath, he isn't here. He's been gone the past week. What was fast becoming a common occurrence, Kurenai failed to put together a coherent sentence in reply. Frowned at the dazed expression on Kurenai's face. What, you think I'm in the wrong? Well, it's that damn Anko's fault. It was her idea in the first place, growled. Kurenai knew who Anko was. She didn't think there was anybody in the entire shinobi population who didn't know who the psychotic Kunoichi was, and if this woman was her friend, then maybe Kurenai needed to leave and find another store as soon as possible. Surely you can find your friend and get her to help you. Unfortunately I can't. I heard she suddenly requested and took a courier mission to that hidden sand village. That's kind of harsh. Kurenai said, not meaning to speak her thought out loud. Looked morose, making Kurenai feel slightly sorry for the woman. True, she brought a lot of the coming problem on herself, but as hard as she was taking it, it let Kurenai know that the platinum-haired woman truly felt sorry for what she did. And she was about to volunteer her help to mediate the situation when suddenly seemed to perk up. Bad move, Anko, bad move. MWUA, ha 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 ha. Cackled gleefully, scaring a good number of people who began to inch back. Kurenai tried telling the goddess about the effect she was having on the shopping populace. I'll just tell Naruto everything that happened and blame it on her. She's not here to defend herself, and this'll serve as punishment for running off on me. Kurenai's earlier thoughts of the woman feeling responsible for the damage died a quick and painful death. Grabbing Kurenai's hands, used the most powerful Jutsu magic known to mankind. The dreaded puppy eyes, taught to her by the masters themselves, Konohamaru and his friends. Please come with me. I don't think I'll be able to handle him alone. Kurenai looked at the woman in disbelief. Naruto cannot seriously be that big of a problem. He's only 12 years old. True, he may be a big softy, but there are some things you don't mess with. His ramen and his bed are two of them. Then why did you do it in the first place? Kurenai asked after a moment of silence. Blinked, easily answering the question. Oh, that's easy. We knew he wouldn't let us do it if he was here. But now you think you're in trouble? Seemed pleased. Kurenai finally put everything together. Deciding that wasting any more time would bring dire consequences, grabbed Kurenai by the wrist, showing a tremendous amount of strength by easily dragging the reluctant Kunoichi. Come on, we have to get everything together. But I never agreed to help. Sadly, her words fell on deaf ears. Naruto managed to keep Tsunade from finding out too much about his lifestyle, but he knew from the calculating gaze she continued to level on him that he really had not helped his overall chances of getting her to lay off. Add Jiraiya's startlingly unrealistic comments about his living arrangements and the questions just kept on coming. A small part of him wondered why the hell the old crone was so interested in his life, but chalked it up to her still being a bit emotional from the last battle. However, they were nearing the massive gate that allowed entrance to Konoha, and Naruto almost shed tears at the sight. He was almost home free. Speeding his slow trot into a full-on power walk, Naruto was several feet from the gates when he could see Mitarashi Anko reclining against one of the guard posts, making idle chatter to an apprehensive Chunin guard. Anko-sensei? She looked at him, a wide toothy grin spreading across her face. Quickly striding toward him, she bent down and gave him a bone-crushing hug. Hey Squirt, how'd your trip go? Naruto tried to get his brain to start functioning properly again. A hard feat when Anko was pressed up against him like a second skin. Okay, I ran into that bastard sensei of yours. Anko cocked an eyebrow. Oh really? Yeah, and I learned this new super cool move I want to show you. Soon as I get home, Naruto said, ecstatic. You can show me later, but I got. The sound of someone clearing their throat stopped the two-person conversation, and Anko looked up into the faces of three people with widely varying expression on their faces. Jiraiya was giving off that lecherous grin of his, while Tsunade looked interested in the interaction between Naruto and the, to her, unknown woman. Shizune eyed the woman's almost scandalous attire with wide eyes and asked, Naruto-kun, who is your friend? This is Anko-san. She helps teach me since Kakashi-sensei is always busy with that Sasuke bastard. Pointing to each person in turn, he introduced Anko to the three travelers behind him. You already know Ero Sanin, the lady with the pig in Shizune Nichan, and the old lady is Tsunade Bachan. Jiraiya reached out and slugged Naruto in the back of the head. Shizune gave a smile and cheery wave. One Anko returned in kind, but when her eyes landed on Tsunade, Anko gave a scrutinizing look, trying to discern the strange vibe she was getting from the woman. Something is not right with her. Tsunade thought nothing of the probing look, raising an eyebrow in question. Is there a problem? Anko shook her head before stopping her search, easily forgetting this woman was one of Konoha's most powerful ninjas ever. Sorry, just been long day. Tsunade said nothing, delivering a tight nod. Naruto's foul-mouthed cursing drew Anko's attention, which also helped her remember the reason she was out in front of the village in the first place. Naruto-kun, I came out here to prepare you for trouble before you got home. Disengaging from trying to manhandle Jiraiya, Naruto's facial expression was laced with worry. What's wrong? Is okay? No one did anything to you, did they? His worry for her touched her black heart somewhat, but the thought of getting the brunt of the verbal assault easily pushed her on. No, nothing like that. Kneeling down, Anko cupped her hands over Naruto's ear and started whispering whatever she needed to say. And the longer she talked, the redder Naruto's face became till he calmly stepped away from her and yelled one name at the top of his lungs. Everyone in the village who had the unlucky fortune to run into Naruto the past few months recognized the savage yell, and instead of the hate that regularly came to them, they began boarding up their homes and preparing for the worst. A reasonable action when you considered the chaos that surrounded Naruto on an almost daily basis. Omake, a little girl Sakura stepped into the nicely furnished home, making sure to present the perfect picture of a blossoming young lady. As beautiful as this woman was, Sakura was having a hard time stopping herself from sinking into depression. You said you had something important to talk to me about, san? Sakura asked politely. Nodded. Yeah, I did. I have some questions I need answered and you can help a lot. Smiling, Sakura was directed to take a seat and walk toward the nearest couch. Sitting down, her butt slammed into something. It brought a blush to her face because it was jutting into her backside at an embarrassing angle. Reaching down to see what it was, Sakura's eyes were wide enough to transverse her considerable forehead and touch her hairline. Is this? Erd looked at the objects in Sakura's hand. Oh, sorry about that. Naruto's real careless about putting up the toys. In her hands was a ball gag and handcuffs. Sakura's brain failed to compute anything else. Even inner Sakura for once in her lifetime had nothing to say, mostly because she was knocked out cold, a sliver of drool pooling around her face. Don't look so shocked, Erd said. We managed to keep him sated enough so he won't go after any of you. I don't think you all could handle him anyway. The kid could go all day if we let him. She could see Sakura's eyes roll into the back of her head, and Erd wasn't quick enough to stop Sakura's forehead from making a thunderous thud, shattering the wooden coffee table into pieces. Erd released a sigh. Morrigan is going to kill me. That table cost a fortune. Thanks go to Johnny G for proofing this chapter. Once again, also got to thank Michael68 for the Is this? Erd looked at the objects in Sakura's hand. Oh, sorry about that. Naruto's real careless about putting up the toys. In her hands was a ball gag and handcuffs. Sakura's brain failed to compute anything else. Even inner Sakura for once in her lifetime had nothing to say, mostly because she was knocked out cold, a sliver of drool pooling around her face. Don't look so shocked, Erd said. We managed to keep him sated enough so he won't go after any of you. I don't think you all could handle him anyway. The kid could go all day if we let him. She could see Sakura's eyes roll into the back of her head, and Erd wasn't quick enough to stop Sakura's forehead from making a thunderous thud, shattering the wooden coffee table into pieces. Erd released a sigh. Morrigan is going to kill me. That table cost a fortune. Thanks for watching, guys.